The urgent plea from my neighbor was what cracked my entire world open. "Get out of here while you still can. Your son and that wife of his are pure evil," he'd said. I asked him, what on earth did they do? He then told me a truth so terrible, it made my knees give way, a shock so profound, I nearly passed out. And that truth changed absolutely everything. But before I get into that, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel and maybe let me know in the comments what time it is where you're listening from. The Sterling contract papers were splayed across my cherry wood desk like a mess of dead autumn leaves. 25 years I'd spent building Vance Global Freight from the ground up, and now, just like that, they were gone. My coffee had turned to sludge hours ago, a disgusting skin forming over the cold liquid. I nudged my glasses up the bridge of my nose and read the cancellation letter one more time, as if the words might magically rearrange themselves. Effective immediately, it stated in cold corporate font. $3 million in yearly revenue vanished into thin air. I sank back into my worn leather chair, the weight of my 68 years settling deep into my shoulders. The bright Colorado sun cut through the blinds of my office, drawing stark stripes across the bleak financial statements. I felt my jaw tighten as I did the grim math. At least 3 people would have to be laid off, maybe 4. The sharp ring of the telephone sliced through the heavy afternoon silence. My first instinct was to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail. I wasn't in the mood for another client calling to deliver another blow. But the name on the caller ID stopped me cold. Leo, my son. 4 years. 4 years since our last real conversation, since he had stormed out of this very office, his voice echoing with accusations about my supposed lack of faith in his ambitions. I just stared at the phone, my thumb hesitating over the green answer icon. "Hello?" "Dad." His voice was softer, more hesitant than I remembered. "I know it's been a long time, and I know that's mostly on me, but..." I held my breath, waiting. The Sterling contract suddenly felt a world away. "Chloe and I, we'd love for you to come visit. We've really missed you." My late wife Eleanor's picture, sitting on the corner of my desk, seemed to smile at me. She always said I was too stubborn, too hard on the boy. "When were you thinking? How about this Friday? We could make you a fantastic dinner. I've been wanting to show you the house, and Chloe has turned into an amazing cook." He paused, and the next words were the ones I'd been waiting 4 years to hear. "I owe you an apology, Dad, for how everything ended between us." The memory of that fight flooded back. Leo, then 36, demanding $75,000 to invest in some kind of revolutionary social app. I can still see his face, contorted with rage, when I'd refused, when I told him it was time to get a real job, to stop chasing pipe dreams. "You've never once believed in me," he'd screamed. "I believe in sweat and hard work," I'd yelled back, "not some get-rich-quick fantasy." The office door had slammed shut with a force that shook the windows. Eleanor's picture had actually fallen from the wall that day. "I've missed you too, son," I said, the words feeling scratchy and foreign in my throat. "I'll drive out Friday morning." "Really? That's incredible, Dad. We're in Bel Air now. I'll text you the address." Bel Air. It seemed the boy had done all right for himself. Maybe I had been wrong all along. Maybe Eleanor's gentle wisdom had been right, as it so often was. After we hung up, I just sat there in the quiet for a long time. The Sterling contract was still there, a monument to my failure, but it seemed smaller now, less catastrophic. Family was more important than business. It always was. I went to my bedroom and dug out my good suitcase, the one Eleanor and I used for our anniversary getaways. From my dresser, I picked out the Omega Speedmaster I'd been saving for a special occasion. Leo had always admired that watch. For Chloe, I selected the delicate sapphire necklace Eleanor had worn at our wedding. She would have wanted it to stay in the family. It was a long drive, about 8 hours if I started early. I folded my clothes neatly into the bag, my hands feeling steadier than they had all week. My business problems could wait. My son was reaching out, and this time, pride wasn't going to stand in my way. I carried my luggage out to the Lincoln, my old 1998 town car that had been my faithful companion for decades. The leather seats were cracked and worn, but they felt like a comfortable old armchair. As I placed the bags in the trunk, the setting sun painted the Denver sky in hues of fiery orange and deep purple. Tomorrow, I would see Leo. Tomorrow, we would finally start to mend what had been broken. I placed the last bag in the trunk and gazed west toward the horizon where California was waiting. Friday morning broke with the crisp clarity of the high-altitude air. I was backing the Lincoln out of the driveway by 9 o'clock sharp, its old engine humming contentedly. In my rearview mirror, Denver shrank behind me, a city of aspirations built against the backdrop of the Rockies. The highway unrolled before me like a grey ribbon of possibility. I-70 West. It had been my path for countless business trips, but this drive was different. This one was fueled by hope, not by duty. I fiddled with the rearview mirror and met my own gaze, seeing an eagerness in my eyes that I hadn't seen in years. The radio came to life as I merged onto the highway, a classic rock station filling the car's interior, and I found myself humming along. The air conditioning fought a losing battle against the mounting sun as the mountains gave way to the high desert of western Colorado and Utah. By noon, I was in the heart of the desert, a vast, empty expanse where towns were little more than a gas station and a diner. The landscape was a painter's palette of ochre and rust, with the occasional defiant juniper tree reaching for a sky of impossible blue. This stretch of road always made me think of Eleanor. She'd loved these drives. She said the vast emptiness cleared her head. All this space, she used to say, her hand resting on mine over the center console, it gives your soul a chance to breathe. A memory came to me, uninvited. Leo, maybe 10 years old, bouncing in the back seat of this very same car as we headed up to Lake Granby for a fishing weekend. Eleanor had packed enough food to feed a small army, certain we would face starvation in the wilderness just an hour from our suburban home. "Dad, when can I learn to drive?" Leo had asked, his head popping up between our seats. "When your feet can reach the pedals without you sitting on a pile of phone books," I'd chuckled. "That's not fair. Jason's dad lets him steer on their ranch." Well, Jason's dad has more open land and fewer state troopers to worry about. At the lake, I taught him how to cast a line, his small hands clutching the fishing rod with a fierce concentration. Eleanor took a picture of us holding up a trout that was, in all honesty, too small to keep, but we posed with it like we'd just landed a marlin. Later, she laughed so hard she cried as we fumbled to get our little campfire going. "You two couldn't start a fire to save your lives," she'd gasped out between fits of giggles. "We're honing our essential survival skills," I'd protested, though I was laughing right along with her. Those were the good years, before the teenage sulking, before the arguments about college, before the bitter fight about business that had finally torn us apart. When did it all get so damn complicated? The fuel gauge was dipping low, so I pulled off at a dusty stop in Green River. The old man behind the counter looked up from his crossword as I walked in, the sweat beading on my brow despite the blasting AC. "Headed to California to see family?" he asked as he rang up my gas. "My son. Haven't seen him in a few years." A smile creased his weathered face. "Family's the most important thing there is. You're doing the right thing, mister." His simple validation felt like a cool drink of water. I walked back to the Lincoln with a lighter step. The California state line appeared around 3 in the afternoon, marked by the agricultural inspection station and the first sight of palm trees. The landscape began its slow change from desert brown to irrigated green. The traffic started to thicken as I neared the massive sprawl of Los Angeles, and luxury cars began to outnumber the regular sedans and trucks. My old town car suddenly felt out of place among the gleaming Porsches and Teslas that wove through the lanes around me. Bel Air money, it seemed, was a different beast than Denver money. My phone's GPS guided me through increasingly opulent neighborhoods. Perfectly manicured lawns replaced xeriscaping. Glimpses of turquoise swimming pools shone from behind towering hedges. This was Leo's world now, a universe away from the quiet, middle-class Denver suburb where he'd learned to ride his bike. Had I held him back? Had my relentless focus on practicality and hard work stifled his potential? Maybe his success was proof that I had been wrong. Maybe the boy I raised just needed more room to grow than I was ever willing to give him. Traffic slowed to a crawl as I navigated the winding roads of Bel Air. I caught a fleeting glimpse of palatial estates I'd only ever seen in magazines. My palms felt slick on the steering wheel, and it wasn't just from the heat. The GPS voice announced the distance in feet now, not miles. In 1,000 feet, turn left on Bellagio Road. My heart started to beat a little faster. 4 years of silence were about to end. I checked my reflection in the mirror, trying to smooth down my grey hair and straighten my collar. The gift-wrapped boxes sat on the passenger seat, a tangible symbol of my hope. In 500 feet, turn left on Bellagio Road. The house that appeared before me was a white, modernist mansion that looked like it was ripped from the pages of a design journal. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the late afternoon sun, creating a dizzying display of light and glass. A circular driveway swept around a contemporary sculpture that looked like a twisted metal ribbon. Towering palm trees stood like sentinels guarding the immaculate lawn. I parked the Lincoln and just sat there for a minute, trying to take it all in. Leo had done more than well. This was a level of wealth I could scarcely comprehend, and certainly nothing my freight company could have ever provided. A strange mix of pride and intimidation churned in my gut as I grabbed the gifts from the passenger seat. The front door was a massive slab of dark wood with polished chrome hardware that shone like jewelry. I pressed the doorbell and heard a series of soft, melodic chimes echo from within, a tune that probably cost more than my first car. Through the frosted glass panels, I could make out the blurred shapes of furniture and the suggestion of a grand interior, but I heard no footsteps. I waited, adjusting my tie and smoothing the front of my shirt. The desert heat felt different here, humid and heavy with the scent of sprinkler systems and chlorine. After what felt like a full minute, I knocked, my knuckles making a solid sound against the wood. "Leo? Chloe? It's Dad." My voice sounded small on the quiet, empty street. Only silence answered. I checked my phone. 3:45. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. Maybe they were running a last-minute errand for dinner. I rang the bell again, holding it down a little longer this time. The expensive melody played out into the empty house. A small, dark dome near the top of the doorframe blinked a tiny red light. A security camera. It was watching me. I gave a small, awkward wave at it, feeling like an idiot. "Hello? Is anyone home?" The silence stretched on, broken only by the gentle gurgling of the sculpture fountain and the distant whine of a leaf blower somewhere down the street. I decided to walk around the side of the house, the gift bags feeling increasingly heavy in my sweaty hands. The backyard was an oasis, with a sparkling infinity pool, sleek patio furniture, and a gleaming outdoor kitchen that looked like it had never been used. Through a wall of sliding glass doors, I could see a living room that looked like a luxury hotel lobby. Everything was pristine, everything was expensive, and everything was empty. The back door was locked. I walked back to the front, my heart starting to sink. I pulled out my phone and dialed Leo's number. It rang and rang before going to his voicemail. "You've reached Leo Vance. Leave a message." "Leo, it's Dad," I said, trying to keep the worry out of my voice. "I'm here at the house, like we planned. Where are you? Give me a call." I tried Chloe's number next, though I'd only ever spoken to her a handful of times on brief holiday calls. "Hi, you've reached Chloe. I can't get to the phone right now, but please leave a message." "Chloe, it's Arthur. I'm here for dinner. Please give me a call back." The street was dead quiet, except for a groundskeeping crew working on a property across the way. A private security car drove past, the driver giving me a long, suspicious look that made me feel like a trespasser. I sat down on the front steps, placing the gifts beside me. The polished concrete was still warm from the sun. This had to be some kind of misunderstanding, a simple mix-up. People don't invite their estranged father for a reunion dinner and then just not show up, do they? My phone remained silent. No calls, no texts. The cheerful splashing of the fountain was starting to get on my nerves. 4 o'clock came and went. Then 5. The sun began to dip lower and the shadows grew long. The shade I'd been sitting in disappeared, leaving me exposed on the steps like a piece of abandoned luggage. Sweat was soaking through the back of my shirt. My good dress shoes felt tight and hot. The other mansions on the street were just as quiet, with closed gates and empty driveways. It was the peculiar silence of extreme wealth, a world insulated from the noise of ordinary life. I'd never felt so out of place. Maybe I'd gotten the day wrong. Maybe he'd said next Friday. But no, I was sure he'd said this Friday. My eagerness to reconcile hadn't made me invent the date. A familiar feeling of disappointment began to settle in my chest. The same hollow ache I'd felt when Leo missed my 65th birthday party. The same one I felt when he'd been a no-show at Eleanor's funeral service. It was a pattern, repeating itself despite my foolish hopes. I stood up, my knees creaking in protest. The gift bags suddenly felt ridiculous, weighed down with my own naive optimism. It was time to go. Time to accept that some bridges are just ashes. The 4 years of silence had carved a canyon between us too wide to be crossed by a single phone call. My old Lincoln waited for me in the driveway, faithful as ever. I could be back on the road in minutes, back in Denver by morning, back in my own world where at least I understood the rules. I was fumbling for my keys when a man's voice cut through the air. "Wait! Don't go in there!" It came from behind a tall, perfectly sculpted hedge. I spun around, nearly dropping the gifts, as a wiry man in his 50s emerged, holding a pair of electric hedge trimmers. His hair was a mess, and his thick glasses were slipping down his sweaty nose. "Excuse me?" I said, steadying myself against the hot metal of my car. He shot a nervous look at Leo's house, then back at me. "Sir, you need to get out of here, right now. Those people, they're dangerous." The man was wearing a grass-stained polo shirt and dirty work gloves. His frantic energy was unsettling, but his words sent a genuine chill down my spine. "This is my son's house," I said, my voice firm. "I think you're confused." His face went slack with horror. "Your son? Oh, God, you must be the father they were talking about." Ice flowed through my veins, a stark contrast to the humid California air. "What are you talking about? Who was talking about me?" He put down his trimmers and took a step closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your son and his wife, they killed her father, poisoned him for his money." "That's impossible," I said, the words coming out too loud. "You're mistaken. $7 million in inheritance," he hissed. "He died a week after having dinner with them, just like you're about to do." My legs felt like they were made of sand. This is insane. My son would never... He was fit as a fiddle when he came to visit them. A week later, he's dead. The man's hand was shaking. "I'm George, by the way. I live right there." He gestured to the house next door. "I've been watching them ever since it happened." "People die of natural causes all the time," I argued, but my own voice sounded thin and unconvincing. "Natural causes don't usually involve you heaving your guts out in the driveway," George retorted, his eyes darting toward the security cameras on Leo's house. "The other neighbors saw him. He left here looking white as a ghost, got sick right before he even made it to his car. The gift bag for Chloe slipped from my grasp, landing on the hot pavement with a soft thud. The expensive wrapping paper looked absurdly cheerful in the harsh afternoon light. Are you telling me my son is a murderer? The question felt like a foreign object in my mouth. I'm telling you to leave before you end up as their next payday, George said, already backing away toward his hedge, terrified of being seen. That woman, Chloe, there's something off about her. And your son, he's different. He's changed since he met her. My heart was pounding like a drum against my ribs. 4 years of silence suddenly seemed much, much darker. What if Leo had changed? What if the financial trouble I'd refused to help him with had pushed him towards something monstrous? How do you know about the inheritance? I called out. It's a small community up here. People talk. Her father was loaded, lived by himself over in Pasadena. A healthy 70-year-old played tennis 3 times a week. George's voice was barely a whisper now. One dinner with his new son-in-law and daughter, and poof, he's gone. The part of my brain that had built a business on calculating risk began to connect the dots. A wealthy, older parent, a recent marriage, a sudden death right after a family visit. The pattern was chillingly logical, but this was Leo, my son, the little boy I taught to fish, the kid who cried for a week when his hamster died. The teenager who once brought home a stray cat because it looked lonely. I had to warn you. I couldn't live with myself if something happened, George said, but that's all I can do. He grabbed his hedge trimmers and retreated back to his own property, casting one last fearful look at the cameras that were silently recording our conversation. Wait, I called after him. What about the police? What about them? He shot back. Rich people die. It happens. Without clear evidence, there's no investigation. He paused at his gate. Just don't eat or drink anything they give you. Not a thing. And for God's sake, don't spend the night. I watched him vanish behind his hedge, leaving me alone with a swarm of questions that were making my stomach churn. The driveway suddenly felt like the surface of a hot stove. I paced beside the Lincoln, my mind racing. George had to be wrong. He had to be. A paranoid neighbor with a grudge. My son was not a killer. The boy who couldn't stand to see a dead bird on the sidewalk couldn't poison another human being for money. Could he? I bent down and picked up the fallen gift, the sapphire necklace Eleanor had treasured. It was meant to be a peace offering, a symbol that I was ready to trust my son again. Now it felt like a monument to my own foolishness. 4 years. 4 years of silence after we fought about money. What had Leo become in that time? The memory of our last fight felt different now, more sinister. The desperation in his voice when he'd asked for that $75,000. I need this, Dad. My whole future is riding on it. The wild, frantic look in his eyes when I'd said no. You'll be sorry you didn't believe in me. At the time, I'd written it off as the tantrum of a spoiled man-child. Now, it sounded more like a threat. I tried Leo's number again. It went straight to a full voicemail box. Chloe's phone just rang and rang. Where were they? If this was a genuine invitation, why weren't they here? Why had they left me sitting on their doorstep for nearly 3 hours? The modernist mansion loomed over me, its clean white lines no longer looking impressive, but cold and menacing. The security cameras felt less like protection and more like surveillance, their little red lights blinking like the unblinking eyes of a predator. How many other people had those cameras watched in their final hours? Eleanor's voice echoed in my head. You're too hard on him, Arthur. Leo has your drive, but he doesn't have your patience. Be careful you don't push him too far. Had I pushed him to this? Had my refusal to support his dreams, my constant criticism, created the kind of desperation that leads a man to murder? It was insane. People didn't kill their own family for money, except they did. It was on the news every other week. Inheritance disputes, life insurance policies, elderly parents found dead under mysterious circumstances. I leaned against the warm hood of the Lincoln. The late afternoon sun was relentless, but I barely noticed. My thoughts were a chaotic storm. If George was right, then Leo and Chloe had invited me here with the intention of killing me. The son's soft, apologetic voice on the phone, the talk of missing me and wanting to start over. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed performance to lure me into their web. But if George was wrong, if he was just a crazy neighbor, then I was standing here indulging in paranoid fantasies, about to ruin my one and only chance to fix things with my son. $7 million. That's what George had said Chloe inherited. Enough to buy this palace. Enough to fund Leo's extravagant lifestyle. Enough to make all his money problems disappear forever. Enough to kill for. My phone buzzed in my pocket. My heart leaped, but it was just a text from my foreman back in Denver asking about the Sterling account. My normal life, the world of freight and logistics, felt a million miles away. I checked the time. Almost 5:45. The sun was sinking toward the Pacific, bathing the mansions of Bel Air in a soft golden light. It was beautiful and deadly, just like everything else here. I heard the low hum of a car engine in the distance getting closer. My pulse jumped. Someone was coming up the street. The engine sound was smooth and expensive, the purr of a high-end German machine, not the familiar rumble of my old Lincoln. I had about 30 seconds to make a choice. Get in my car and drive away, cementing my distrust of my own son forever. Or stay, put on a smile, and hug Leo when he arrived, potentially walking straight into my own grave. A silver Porsche turned into the driveway, and I had to decide whether to run for my life or greet my son with a hug. The Porsche's engine died with a soft purr, parking directly behind my dusty Lincoln. The windows were heavily tinted, hiding the occupants for a moment that seemed to stretch into an eternity. I forced my face into what I hoped was a passable imitation of a relieved smile, even as my heart hammered against my ribcage. The driver's side door opened. Leo emerged, dressed in clothes I'd never seen him wear, let alone afford. A tailored blazer, a silk shirt, Italian leather loafers that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He looked successful, polished, nothing like the frustrated man who had begged me for money 4 years ago. Dad. His voice was full of what sounded like genuine warmth as he walked toward me, his arms open wide. I am so sorry to keep you waiting. The traffic coming back from the city was an absolute killer. A killer. Was that a deliberate choice of words, or just a cruel coincidence? We had to wrap up some legal matters, he went on, pulling me into a hug that felt both achingly familiar and chillingly foreign. Boring stuff, you know how lawyers can be. Legal matters, like wills perhaps, estate planning. I hugged him back, my mind racing, cataloguing every single detail. The passenger door opened and Chloe stepped out. She looked like she'd just walked off a photo shoot. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a designer dress that clung to her slender frame, and a handbag that likely cost more than a down payment on a small house. She moved with the practiced elegance of someone who knows they're being watched. "Arthur," she cooed, gliding toward me with her arms extended, her smile as bright and artificial as a movie set. "You're even more handsome in person. Leo's shown me so many of your old family photos." She placed a hand on my arm, a gesture that would have seemed friendly just a few hours ago. Now it made my skin crawl. I searched her face for any sign of guilt, any crack in her perfect facade, but all I saw was polished charm. "I do hope you're hungry," she continued. "I've been in the kitchen all afternoon. I made your favourites. Leo told me all about your love for beef Wellington and Eleanor's yeast rolls." How did she know about Eleanor's rolls? Leo must have told her. The intimacy of that detail, used in this context, felt like a desecration. "The drive wasn't too bad, was it, Dad?" Leo asked, glancing at my road-weary appearance with what looked like real concern. 8 hours is a long trip, especially in this heat. "Not too bad," I managed to say, my own voice sounding distant and strange. "The old Lincoln still runs like a dream." "She's a classic," Leo said, running a hand over the car's faded paint with a fond smile. "Remember when you taught me how to drive in this car? I was so terrified I was going to scratch it." The memory was real. It was warm and innocent, and it belonged to another lifetime, before suspicion and murder allegations had poisoned everything. I picked up the gift bags from the hood of my car, my hands shaking just slightly. "I brought a little something for you both." "Dad, you shouldn't have," Leo said, his eyes lighting up with what looked like genuine delight. "You being here is the only gift we need." Chloe clapped her hands together like an excited child. "Oh, how thoughtful. But first things first, let's get you inside and out of this heat. You look flushed. I've got a pitcher of fresh brewed iced tea waiting for you." Iced tea. My throat was bone dry from hours of heat and stress, but George's warning screamed in my mind, "Don't eat or drink anything they give you." They flanked me as we walked toward the massive front door, Leo insisting on carrying one of my bags. Chloe chattered away about their renovations and the neighborhood. They were the perfect hosts, welcoming a beloved father into their home. The front door unlocked with a quiet electronic whir, a keypad, not a key, an expensive, high-tech security system, the kind designed to keep people out, or to keep them in. The inside of the house was breathtaking. Gleaming marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and minimalist designer furniture arranged with an almost sterile precision. The art on the walls looked like it belonged in a gallery. Every single object screamed money, new money, the kind of wealth that appears overnight and begs questions. "We've made a few upgrades since we moved in," Leo said, a note of pride in his voice as he gave me a tour. "We had the kitchen completely redone. Chloe has very specific tastes." Specific tastes, I thought, or specific needs. "A space designed for privacy and control over what goes into the food. It's magnificent," I said, and I meant it. "You two have certainly done well for yourselves. We got lucky with a few investments," Leo said vaguely, in a tone that made it clear the subject was closed. "Come on, let me show you the living room. The view of the canyon from the back is incredible." They led me deeper into their palace, their voices a constant stream of cheerful patter. Their movements were so casual, so confident. If this was all an act, it was the most flawless performance I had ever seen, and if it was real, then George was just a paranoid old man. But as I followed them into the house, it felt less like a home and more like a beautifully designed trap, and I couldn't shake the chilling certainty that I was being led toward the kitchen where Eleanor used to hum while she cooked our family dinners, a place now potentially repurposed for my murder. Eleanor's favourite tune followed me into that gleaming, sterile kitchen like a ghost from a life I no longer recognised. Chloe stood at a massive 6-burner stove, her back to me, humming the melody as she stirred a pot that smelled of rosemary and garlic. The sound twisted something deep inside me, my dead wife's song, coming from the mouth of the woman who might be planning to kill me. "Just grabbing a glass of water," I announced, pulling open a cabinet I assumed would hold glasses. Instead, I found rows of delicate crystal stemware, pieces that looked like they should be behind glass in a museum. Everything in this house was for show. "Glasses are in the upper left cabinet, Arthur," Chloe called out, not even turning around. "Got it, thanks." My hand reached for a simple tumbler, but as I did, the cabinet door swung open a little wider. Tucked away behind the dish soap and a bottle of Windex, a small, dark, amber bottle caught my eye. It was out of place. My mind, honed by decades of assessing risk in the freight business, immediately flagged it. "You don't keep medicine next to cleaning supplies." I glanced over my shoulder. Chloe was still at the stove, lost in her cooking and her humming. The bottle was cool in my palm. The label was facing me, stark and clear, as if it wanted to be seen. Potassium cyanide, handle with extreme care. The universal symbols for poison, the skull and crossbones, seemed to grin up at me. My world tilted on its axis. George was right. They were actually going to kill me. My hand started to shake and I almost dropped it. Every crime thriller I'd ever watched, every news report about a family inheritance gone wrong, it was all happening to me. This wasn't a movie. This was my son, planning to poison his own father. How much would it take? The label's dire warnings suggested that even a tiny amount would be lethal. My businessman's brain was calculating probabilities while my father's heart was shattering into a million pieces. Behind me, the sounds of dinner preparation continued. The gentle scrape of a wooden spoon against a pot, the rhythmic chop of a knife. She was completely oblivious. She had no idea I had just found her murder weapon. She probably thought she was so clever, hiding it in plain sight where no one would ever think to look. But I had looked, and now I knew. I forced my trembling fingers to place the bottle back exactly as I had found it, tucking it behind the same bottle of blue window cleaner. I closed the cabinet with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. Every move had to be normal, casual, just a thirsty father-in-law getting a glass of water. I ran the tap, the cold water splashing into the glass as my mind raced. The $7 million inheritance, this house, this lifestyle, it all clicked into place. They'd done this before. I was just the next name on their list. "Is the water okay, Arthur?" Chloe's voice was laced with a false sweetness. "It's perfect. Thank you." I turned from the sink, the glass cool against my hand, and looked at her. I saw her differently now. Every graceful movement seemed calculated. Every charming smile was a mask for a killer. She had murdered her own father, and now she was helping my son plot my death. The irony was a bitter pill. She was humming Eleanor's song while preparing to send me to my grave to join her, but I had an advantage now. They thought I was a foolish, unsuspecting old man, desperate for a family reunion. They had no idea that I knew their plan, that I had found their weapon, that I could see right through their performance. I took a long, slow drink of water, giving myself a moment to think. How many other people had stood in this kitchen, smiling at them, trusting them, only to die a few days later? How many family dinners had been held in this house that were actually executions? The humming continued, that beautiful melody now corrupted and sinister. I turned away from the sink with the water glass in my hand, knowing that the family dinner Chloe was preparing was meant to be my last. The living room now felt like a stage, and I was the only one in the audience who knew the play was a tragedy. Leo glanced up from a magazine as I walked in, his smile the same one I'd taught him to use on difficult clients back when he was a teenager. "Find everything okay, Dad?" "Yes, thank you. That's quite a kitchen you've got." The words came out more calmly than I felt. "You've both built a beautiful home here. I deliberately chose a large leather armchair that gave me a clear line of sight into the kitchen doorway." Leo, too busy playing the gracious host, didn't seem to notice my strategic positioning. From here, I could watch Chloe's every move. "So, tell me about this LA real estate market," I said, needing to keep Leo's focus on me and away from my subtle surveillance. "Seems you timed your entry perfectly." "We've been very fortunate with some of our investments," he replied, using the same vague phrase as before. "The real secret is knowing when to take a calculated risk." Through the doorway, I could see Chloe moving between the counter and the stove. Several bottles of expensive-looking red wine were open on the marble island. An hour ago, I would have been impressed. Now, they just looked like props in a murder plot. "Arthur, do you have a preference? Red or white?" she called out from the kitchen. "I'll have whatever you're recommending," I called back, my eyes fixed on her as she selected a bottle of Cabernet. Leo launched into a detailed explanation of California wine country, and I made sure to nod and give the appropriate responses. But my real attention was on the kitchen, where Chloe was pouring 3 glasses of the deep red wine. She placed 2 of the glasses on one side of the island, near the window. The third glass she kept by the stove. My heart began to pound as she glanced back toward the living room, checking to see if we were watching. Leo was in the middle of a monologue about different grape varietals, completely oblivious. Chloe then reached down into the lower cabinet, the same one where I had just found the bottle of poison. Time seemed to slow down as she retrieved the small amber container. Her movements were swift and practiced. This was not the first time she had done this. A few clear drops fell from a small dropper into the wine glass closest to her. 1, 2, 3. She gave the glass a gentle swirl, the poison disappearing into the dark red liquid. The bottle vanished back into its hiding spot. "And that's what really separates a good wine from a great wine," Leo was saying, his voice sounding like it was coming from far away. "A great wine mixed with a lethal poison," I thought grimly, as I watched Chloe arrange the 3 glasses on a sleek, modern serving tray. The poisoned glass was still in the same position. I burned its location into my memory. She was humming again. Eleanor's song, the same melody my wife would sing as she cooked Sunday dinner for our little family. Now it was the soundtrack to my own planned execution. "Gentlemen, the wine is ready," Chloe announced, her voice dripping with theatrical warmth as she emerged from the kitchen, holding the tray. Leo jumped to his feet. "Finally! I'm parched." I stood up more slowly, my mind a flurry of calculations. The poisoned glass was on the right side of the tray, closest to the hand she was using to steady it. She knew exactly which one was for me. "This is long overdue," Leo said, putting his arm around my shoulder as we walked toward the dining room. A family, all together again. Family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. My son was leading me to dinner like a sheep to the slaughter, his voice filled with false sentiment, while his wife carried my death sentence on a silver tray. The dining table was a polished expanse of dark wood, reflecting the light of the crystal chandelier above. 3 place settings were arranged with perfect symmetry. It was beautiful and terrifying, like everything else in this house. As we neared the dining table, set with fine china that shone in the candlelight, Chloe placed the tray of wine glasses at the center, the poisoned one waiting to be claimed. Candles flickered across the polished mahogany as Chloe orchestrated our seating like a director placing actors for a fatal scene. The dining room was straight out of a magazine, the crystal chandelier casting 1,000 tiny rainbows through the wine glasses. Each plate was probably worth more than my foreman's weekly paycheck. "Arthur, you sit here at the head of the table," she said, gesturing to the chair that was furthest from any door. "The place of honor for our guest." Leo sat to my right, and Chloe took the seat to my left. They had me boxed in, a perfect triangle of false intimacy. The whole thing felt chillingly rehearsed. "A toast," Leo declared, raising his wine glass with a flourish, "to family reunions." Chloe lifted hers in perfect sync, to healing old wounds and to new beginnings. My glass sat directly in front of me. In the candlelight, the poisoned Cabernet looked like liquid rubies, beautiful and deadly. I could smell its rich, fruity aroma. There was no hint of the cyanide that would stop my heart within minutes. I appreciate the sentiment, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. But I've had to stop drinking. Leo's smile faltered, a flicker of surprise, then annoyance. Since when? You always loved a good glass of red with dinner. Doctor's orders, I said, the lie coming easily. My new blood pressure medication. It doesn't mix with alcohol. I saw it then, a microsecond of a crack in Chloe's perfect hostess mask. It was a fleeting look of pure frustration. Oh, of course, Leo recovered quickly, but he shot a look at Chloe, a look that said, "What now? Your health is the most important thing." They had a backup plan. Of course they did. Chloe makes this incredible fresh-pressed juice, he continued, his enthusiasm now sounding forced. An apple-cranberry blend. It's fantastic. You'll love it. The small wink he gave his wife wasn't playful. It was a signal. Plan B was a go. Whatever was in that juice would be just as lethal as the wine. I'll go get it right now, Chloe said, rising from her chair with a renewed sense of purpose. Her disappointment had been replaced by cold determination. While she was in the kitchen, Leo filled the silence with nervous chatter about the LA lifestyle, his words coming out a little too fast as he kept glancing at his watch. "We have some exciting things planned for tomorrow," he said, then quickly corrected himself. "I mean, we were hoping you'd consider staying for the weekend. We could show you around the city. Plans that were contingent on me not surviving the night." The whir of a blender started up in the kitchen. It ran for an unusually long time. I kept Leo engaged, asking him questions about the house, all while straining to hear what was happening in the other room. I heard the refrigerator door open and close several times, the clinking of glasses, the pouring of liquid. The process seemed overly complicated for simple juice. "Here we are. Our signature blend," Chloe announced as she returned, carrying an elegant glass pitcher filled with a dark crimson liquid. Ice cubes clinked against slices of orange and floating cranberries. It was a professional presentation designed to mask a murder. "Arthur, you simply must try this." She poured a tall glass and set it in front of me, her movements precise. They both watched me, their gazes intense, waiting for me to lift the glass to my lips. "It looks wonderful," I said, choosing my words carefully, "but I'm still quite full from all that water. Perhaps I'll have some with dessert. I wouldn't want to spoil my appetite for that delicious-smelling beef Wellington." Leo's insistence was immediate. "Come on, Dad, just one sip." Chloe worked so hard on it, the pressure was building. Their desperation was beginning to leak through the cracks in their performance. Leo's voice was a little too high, and Chloe's hands were clasped tightly in her lap as she leaned forward slightly in her chair. "Please, Arthur," she purred, her tone a mix of pleading and command. "Just one taste." For me, she was like a predator, coiled and ready to pounce if I resisted any further. They had too much riding on this night to let me walk away. I pushed my chair back from the table, feigning a look of satisfied contentment. "Excuse me," I said, standing up. "I just need to use the restroom before we dive into this wonderful meal." As I stood, I saw them exchange a look, a split-second glance that confirmed everything. They had no intention of ever letting me leave this house alive. The hallway stretched out before me, a lifeline. The walls were lined with framed photos, Leo's graduation, his wedding to Chloe, vacations in Tuscany, a gallery of a happy life, all funded by blood money. Every step I took toward the guest bathroom felt deliberate, measured. Moving too fast would betray my panic. Too slow might make them suspicious. "Just need to freshen up before we eat," I called over my shoulder, my voice pitched to a note of casual, elderly politeness. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me. I turned the lock, the sound echoing in the small marble-tiled room. For the first time in hours, I was alone with my knowledge and my terror. My hands trembled as I pulled my phone from my pocket. Full bars. Thank God. I dialed 911, turning the volume down as low as it would go and pressing the phone tight against my ear. 911. "What is your emergency?" "My name is Arthur Vance," I whispered, my voice barely a rustle. "My son and his daughter-in-law are trying to poison me." "Sir, can you speak up? Are you in immediate danger?" Yes, but I have to whisper. I'm locked in their bathroom. They've tried to poison me twice tonight. I think it's potassium cyanide. The dispatcher's tone changed instantly, sharpening with professional urgency. What is your location? I gave her the Bel Air address, my voice cracking under the strain. Through the thick wood of the door, I could hear Leo and Chloe's muffled voices, their tone normal, probably discussing their next move now that I was out of the room. I found the bottle of poison in their kitchen. I continued in a frantic whisper. I watched her put it in my wine, and I'm sure it's in the juice too. They killed her father the same way for his inheritance money last year. Sir, stay on the line with me. Officers are being dispatched to your location. Are there any other weapons in the house? I don't know about guns. The poison is what they're using. They think I'm just an old man in the bathroom. How many individuals are in the house with you? 2. My son, Leo, and his wife, Chloe. They're waiting for me in the dining room. The dispatcher's calm, steady voice was an anchor in my storm of fear. Officers should be there in approximately 15 to 20 minutes. Can you remain in a safe location until they arrive? 20 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. I have to go back out there, I whispered. If I stay in here too long, they'll know something is wrong. The poisoned drinks are still on the dining table. The cyanide bottle is under the kitchen sink, behind the Windex. Do not touch anything else, sir. Let the officers handle the evidence. Keep your phone on you, but make sure it's not visible. I flushed the toilet and ran the faucet, creating the sounds of normal activity. I glanced at myself in the mirror. I looked 100 years old, but there was a fire in my eyes I hadn't seen since Eleanor died. It was the fire of survival. What if they try to force me to drink something? Refuse, sir. Make any excuse you can. Help is on the way, Mr. Vance. I understand. I'm going back out now. I ended the call, slipped the phone back into my pocket, took one deep, ragged breath, and prepared for the performance of my life. I was the unsuspecting father, ready for dinner, completely unaware that his son and daughter-in-law were planning for dessert to be his final course. A knock came at the door. Dad? You doing okay in there? Leo's voice. Dessert's almost ready. Coming right out, son. I unlocked the door and stepped back into the hallway, walking toward the dining room, knowing that in less than 20 minutes, this house of lies would be swarming with police, and my son's life, as he knew it, would be over. The dining room was a stage set for my final act. Chloe had placed an elaborate apple pie on the sideboard, steam rising from its perfectly golden crust. Hours ago, it would have looked delicious. Now, it was just another potential weapon. Arthur, I baked this just for you, she chirped, a serving knife poised over the dessert. Leo told me it's your absolute favorite. It looks incredible, Chloe. Thank you, I said, discreetly glancing at my watch. 15 more minutes, but I am absolutely stuffed from that wonderful dinner. I think I need to let it settle for a bit. Leo's smile was tight, his enthusiasm strained. Come on, Dad. Just a tiny slice. Chloe was in the kitchen all afternoon making it. I deflected again, turning the conversation. Tell me more about this neighborhood. I saw some unbelievable homes on the drive-in. The market must be white hot. The small talk was buying me precious seconds, but I could feel their frustration mounting. Leo kept checking his phone. Chloe's knuckles were white as she gripped the handle of the pie server. And then I heard it, the sound of salvation, car doors slamming outside. Not one, but several. Leo frowned, looking toward the front of the house. That's odd. We aren't expecting anyone. Heavy, purposeful footsteps crunched on the gravel of the driveway. The doorbell chimed its melodic tune, immediately followed by a loud, authoritative knock that vibrated through the heavy front door. I'll get it, Leo said, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion. Chloe followed him out of the dining room as I remained seated, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and profound relief. LAPD. We received a 911 call reporting a possible poisoning in progress at this address. Leo's voice was a choked gasp. Poisoning? Officer, there must be a mistake. I stood up and walked calmly into the grand foyer. 3 uniformed police officers filled the doorway, their solid presence instantly turning the opulent entryway into a crime scene. Officers, I said, my voice clear and strong. I'm Arthur Vance. I made the call. The colour drained from Chloe's face. She looked like a porcelain doll that had just been shattered. Leo's confusion morphed into pure horror as the reality of the situation crashed down on him. Dad? What have you done? "I called for help, son," I replied, my voice devoid of the emotion that was raging inside me. "I called when I realized you invited me here to murder me." The lead officer stepped forward, his eyes on me. "Mr. Vance, can you show us the items you mentioned on the call?" I gestured back toward the dining room. "The glasses of poisoned wine and juice are on the table. The bottle of potassium cyanide is in the kitchen, under the sink, hidden behind a bottle of Windex." Leo's denials began, frantic and desperate. "This is crazy. We would never hurt my father. He must be confused. Maybe he's having some sort of medical episode." But Chloe was silent. Her cold, calculating mind was already running through the odds, the escape routes. Her silence was more damning than Leo's panicked lies. Two of the officers proceeded toward the dining room, while the third went into the kitchen. Within moments, they were taking photos and carefully bagging the wine and juice I had refused to drink. "We've got the bottle," the officer called from the kitchen. "It's exactly where he said it was." Leo's face went ashen. The evidence was real. It was physical. It was undeniable. "Sir, you're under arrest for attempted murder," the lead officer said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Dad, please," Leo's voice broke as the cold steel clicked around his wrists. "Tell them it's a misunderstanding. Please." I finally met his eyes, and I knew it would be for the last time as free men. "You stopped being my son the moment you decided to kill me for my money," I said, the words cutting through a lifetime of broken promises and my own willful blindness. Chloe's arrest was quiet and efficient. She didn't fight. She didn't plead. She just stared at me, and in her eyes I saw nothing but pure, cold hatred. Drawn by the flashing lights, George appeared from his house next door. "I tried to warn him about these two," he told one of the officers. "I knew something was terribly wrong over here." "Thank you, George," I said, as Leo and Chloe were led to separate patrol cars. "You saved my life." A small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the street, their faces illuminated by the flashing red and blue lights, all silently watching the spectacle of wealth and privilege collapsing in on itself. The magnificent house, which had seemed so impressive just hours ago, now looked like what it was: a tomb, a monument to greed built with blood money. As the police cars pulled away, carrying my son and his wife into the night, I stood alone in the driveway where I had arrived with so much foolish hope. Justice was just beginning, and the hardest part, living with the truth of what my family had become, still lay ahead. The months that followed, from June through September, were a miserable haze of legal consultations, evidence depositions, and long, sleepless nights. I sold Vance Global Freight, needing the capital for the legal battle and finding I no longer had the heart for the business. My house in Denver was too full of ghosts, so I rented a small, sterile apartment in LA to be close to the proceedings. The media was relentless. Denver tycoon survives son's poison plot. George was my rock through it all, calling me every few days, a constant reminder that I had made the right, albeit impossible, choice. September 15th was a bright, sunny California day. Inside the Superior Courthouse, the formal, wood-paneled courtroom felt surreal. There, at the defendant's table, sat my son and his wife, flanked by their expensive lawyers. The prosecution laid out its case with brutal efficiency, the amber bottle of poison presented to the jury in a clear evidence bag, the lab reports confirming the presence of cyanide in both the wine and the juice, the financial records that painted a clear picture of Chloe's sudden inheritance and their subsequent, lavish spending. George took the stand and recounted his nervous warning, his testimony painting a vivid picture of that terrible afternoon. Then it was my turn. "Mr. Vance," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court, in your own words, what happened on the evening of June 20th. I told them everything, the discovery in the kitchen, watching Chloe poison the glass, the desperate whispered 911 call from the bathroom. The jury listened, their faces a mixture of horror and pity as I described what it felt like to perform for my life while my own child served me dinner. The defense tried to paint me as a senile, paranoid old man, but my clear-headed recollection of the facts, backed by a lifetime of running a complex business, dismantled their narrative. "Are you absolutely certain of what you witnessed, Mr. Vance?" the prosecutor asked. "I watched her put the poison in my drink with my own 2 eyes, I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "My son invited me to dinner with the intention of murdering me for my money. The words hung in the silent courtroom, an indictment of everything a family is supposed to be. Expert testimony on the lethality of cyanide followed. Financial investigators detailed the timeline of the inheritance. And most damning of all, the LAPD had reopened the investigation into the death of Chloe's father, finding a host of suspicious parallels. The defense's closing arguments were weak, grasping at straws about improperly stored cleaning chemicals and a simple dinner party gone wrong, but the evidence was a mountain they could not climb. The jury was out for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreman's grim expression said it all. On all counts, we the jury find the defendants guilty. A wave of both profound relief and shattering heartbreak washed over me. Justice was done, but the price was my entire concept of family. The judge was swift. For attempted murder and conspiracy, Leo was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the murder of her father and the attempt on my life, Chloe also received life. The $7 million was ordered to be returned to her father's estate. As they led Leo away in chains, he looked at me one last time, his voice a broken plea. "Dad, I never meant for it to go this far. You stopped being my son when you chose money over me," I said, the words tasting like ash. Chloe remained silent and cold to the very end, her face a mask of remorseless defiance. I walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding California sun, feeling both hollow and strangely free. The long drive back to Denver was a journey toward whatever was left of my life. The desert landscape looked different this time, cleaner, as if the truth had burned away all the illusions. With George's help, I packed up the LA apartment. I took a portion of the recovered inheritance money and started a scholarship fund for students in business ethics at the University of Denver. It felt like something Eleanor would have wanted, to turn something so evil into something good. Months later, sitting in my living room in Denver, surrounded by old photos that now told a very different story, I finally understood. Survival isn't just about cheating death. It's about learning how to live after trust has been murdered. Justice was served, but it came at the cost of everything I thought I knew. I learned the hardest lesson of all, that the deepest betrayals often come from the ones we love the most, and that true strength is found in the quiet, lonely act of surviving them. The end of the story.